Following our meeting last week, November 13th, the Council Community and Economic Development Committee met to consider our recommendation, recommendation for amending the zoning code to prohibit adult use cannabis operators from locating in the city of Troy. Since, as a result of that meeting, the committee had asked the commission to review this information and review the video of the November 13th committee meeting, and based on that information, consider if planning commission recommendation would be amended. I'd like to ask Service Safety Director, Mr. Titterington, to possibly give us a little more insight into the matter and what exactly possibly took place.
Well, hopefully you all had the opportunity to watch the video. It was on the 13th. It was the Community and Economic Development Committee that met. There were 2 members of the 3 that were able to attend that evening. If you're not familiar with our process, I'd say 99% of all potential legislation is assigned to one of several committees of 3 of the 9 council members, and those 3 can then push potential legislation forward to the council as a positive recommendation. And so after discussion of all the issues, after listening to further input and reviewing all the surveys and public comments, you all should have gotten a very comprehensive packet of that information. The committee members were not able to come, the 2 that were there were not able to come to any consensus to bring the matter forward to the council. So in lieu of just not doing anything, since we are in the midst of a moratorium, that's why they asked the Planning Commission to reconvene, review the information, and then consider, either reaffirming the recommendation that's already in front of council, or if there was any interest in modifying that recommendation. If we're simply reaffirming, then there doesn't need to be any kind of motion or a formal action by the Planning Commission, because the recommendation is still a valid recommendation and has not yet been acted on by the council. But if there's any interest in amending the recommendation, that's when a formal motion and a second would be required. I will say that the law director is in the audience if you have any technical legal questions. But I think that about sums it up.
Okay, thank you, sir. One question I just want to get out on the record is, Austin, you had prepared a report at the last meeting. Are there any changes or amendments to that report?
There are no changes to that report.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone on the commission wish to speak to this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I read the material, I watched the video. We sent council a recommendation that simply required a simple majority for a yes or no vote. Instead, they've returned it to us. It seems to me the ball's in their court.
I tend to agree with you. We have no legislative authority, particularly in this matter.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead. I was present for the public hearing with all the comments, pros and cons, received the whole packet of information. My opinion has not changed. I don't see any need to change our recommendation.
Thank you.
I had a question for the law director, for Mr. Kerber, because some point of law was brought out in that video that I didn't quite understand. I think you brought up an issue that could be a problem if we banned the sale of marijuana in the city? Did you bring up an issue that could be a problem?
I don't believe I raised that particular issue, or if I do, I don't recall. I guess the issue that I recall coming up is if council doesn't act upon this, what the potential impact could be. If they don't act affirmatively upon it, then the zoning code remains the same. And under that circumstance, there was some discussion under what districts recreational marijuana operators would be allowed to operate. And there was a discussion where under the code, if a use isn't specified in the zoning code and the recreational, the medical marijuana operator that is not currently within the zoning code, of course there's a ban on the medical dispensary side. So under that circumstance, the zoning administrator would be tasked with identifying a current use that's in the code and operate a recreational marijuana operator would be allowed in those districts most similar to that. And there was some discussion, and Mr. Titterton, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that at least the use that we were kicking around as being most similar is like a cigar, cigarette, tobacco retailer. And it would be, under those circumstances, it would be, those operators would be allowed in those districts in which the tobacco retailers would be allowed.
Thank you.
Mm.
That clarifies it for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could ask another question. The city council can pass an ordinance saying you cannot shoot a firearm in the city, and that's not in the zoning code. Could they not pass an ordinance that says you shall not sell marijuana in the city and not have it in the zoning code?
That's a difficult thing for me to answer right off the, not being put on the spot, and I appreciate the question. Right now, I mean, the code chapter that the voters adopted specifically contemplated like zoning regulations, and they said that, you know, cities can regulate this zoning-wise. There are specific prohibitions that cities and political subdivisions cannot prohibit the use of marijuana. You can't override the state law that is within there. So my unresearched answer to that, with a large asterisk on that, would be most likely not, because the state permits it and specifically permits it. So I don't think the home rule would come into effect, given that that whole chapter was set up to sort of occupy the field as it relates to marijuana operators.
Okay.
But just to clarify, if it's clearly a zoning matter, and because it's a zoning matter, then it needed to start at the Planning Commission, which is why we have the whole process moving forward to council.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's not a non-zoning matter.
Well, I know there's a difference between commerce and non-commerce. Shooting a weapon is not commerce, and this is commerce, but maybe that's the difference.
I got a couple questions that I probably need a little education on. So with the Economic Committee that sent this back to us, there's 2 members on the video that we watched. Is that standard for the committee, or is there usually another member?
No, there's a third member, and he was not able to attend that evening. That's why. There's always an odd number there.
So because someone was not there, essentially...
And one committee member was willing to recommend the ban, and the other one wanted us to not ban but regulate. They did not reach consensus, meaning it doesn't go forward to the council.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is we have a stalemate because we're missing a member at a meeting, right? Essentially, if that member was there could have been a vote one way or another, correct?
There could have, or there could have been a third alternative.
Yeah. And then, so when I was reading or watching that meeting, I guess what I took from it was a lot of the discussion was, hey, we understand that it's here to, basically stay, but we just don't want it downtown. It seems like a lot of discussion centered around specific zoning areas where it would be acceptable if we could put it in XYZ area, and I don't want to start throwing out things. I think B4 was thrown out on the meeting, and we have M3 in front of us here. And there's a lot of discussion on that, if we could actually tie that to a specific zoning district, meaning if you can make it allowable, but it's allowable in X district, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to throw out something, but it's allowable in X district, that seemed like to have some type of discussion or something that would work out. Like if people could have it, but not have it downtown, they could have it XYZ some other place. But it seemed like that the committee that reviewed that kind of put that back on the planning commission because they didn't have that information. Is that how you understood that? Or?
Well, there was some the discussion. I mean, that was part of them wanting the planning commission just to have, all of that background information. Mm-hmm. There were several members that stated in part, and I'm paraphrasing, that if it were not to be a ban, then we definitely don't want it downtown.
Yeah.
The challenge is that downtown has probably 3 out of the 4 business districts, plus another 9 or 10 districts of various ilks in the downtown area. B4 would be the only place or the only business district that is not in downtown. The thing to remember though is that once any use is added as a principal permitted use, in the future, if there was any property that was rezoned in the downtown area as B4, then that becomes a principal permitted use that could then enter into the downtown or be used as a type of business. And
we just went through this entire comprehensive planning. The districts we're talking about, B4, that's the district that's going to be applicable moving forward as part of the comprehensive plan, or are we still talking about old business districts?
We're talking about the current business district makeup, but the intent would be, since we are involved in the middle of it won't be a zoning code, it'll be a UDC, Unified Development Code, is that whatever's intended in those various districts and excluded in those various districts would be folded into the new code, so there wouldn't be a drastic change like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I just have a statement. I want to say something publicly that I've said privately. I understand why this process must start with us. But ultimately, the city council is made up of elected officials who have to respond to their constituents. So this is their job. I understand why it has to start with us, but it is their job.
Yeah, and I don't think we really have any legislative authority to, determine what the final decision would be made. That rests with council. Is there any proposed amendment, or is there anyone who feels that they individually would want to make a motion to make a modification to amend the action we took last week?
I mean, the only thing I just keep kind of wrapping my head around here is that, is if we pass this off, are we past the moment of where staff comes up with a solution that can accommodate what some people are asking for, I guess, is what I would kind of wonder. If we pass this off have we exerted all options, I would say, in our zoning code to look at possible options. And the only reason I kind of keep going back to it is, listen, it passed with a vote, right? So it's here to stay. I heard the comments about the really just the pie in the sky revenue dollars. We don't really know what it's gonna say or what's gonna do, right? So, you know, obviously we'll kick it down the road if it's not voted on by council, right, is what we're doing. But, you know, the question is like, are we doing everything from a planning commission to say, hey, listen, if you really want this thing to happen, here's how it could happen, and here's where it could happen, and here's how you can contain it versus blowing it, you know, through the whole B4 district that we talked about. I don't know that, and that's why I just want to, my only comment is, have we done everything to research that more than just saying, hey, this is the district, this is what it is, if it goes here, it could end up behind you, you know, kind of thing. I mean, that's...
I don't know how much more research we actually could do, Jordan. You know, the planning commission is an entirely separate body. It is a requirement under the state code that in a non-political forum to look at the comprehensive plan, to, you know, consider the economic environment, to consider all of the zoning districts and where they're located, and whether or not, and the history and the precedent that, frankly, we've already set in the past. I don't believe you were on the planning commission at the time, but the planning commission and ultimately the council voted to ban medical.
Sure. Yep.
You know, they've also, we've also in the past, and the council as well, have relegated certain uses to single business districts, tattoo parlors, strip clubs, or adult entertainment clubs, whatever we call them, and then pawn shops, they're only allowed in one district. And so, you know, beyond that, I mean, and I think we had already considered that at the last meeting, and it was discussed the other night as well, as you mentioned in the video. Beyond that, though, I'm not sure what else, you know, we can look at.
Gotcha.
It is my understanding also that the staff, as they look through this in other, you know, and see what's happening in other communities, they can always propose a change in the zoning and bring it back to us. We don't have final say on whether it's adopted or not. That's still council's prerogative. But it's an issue that can come back up based on the recommendation.
I just will say, I don't have any change in our original recommendation. I still hold strong to not want to make any different recommendation.
Okay, appreciate that.
Same.
Well, hearing no other recommendations, I would, or any motions, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I don't think that's debatable, is it? I don't believe that's debatable.
Well, make a motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?